Now in the analysis, the beginning itself, I have given a heading, Philosophico-Ethical Ethos of Indian Systems of Philosophy. There are certain common elements that we notice among these systems. I call these common elements philosophico-ethos. Whether you take the non-Vedic systems or the Vedic systems, it does not matter. There is something common to all of them. All of them which have originated in the Indian soil. I call it as the philosophico-ethos, the ethos of the systems, the ethics of the systems. That is something common, very distinctive. I mentioned, first of all, the unity of theory and practice. This is a very important point that we have to notice. If we carefully study the philosophical systems in India, whether we consider the Vedic systems or the non-Vedic systems, it does not matter. We notice that there is something common. I call this common factor as the ethos of the systems, as the milieu of the system. Milieu is a weaker word, I thought. Ethos is a stronger word. First, I say that there is unity of theory and practice. That means philosophy is not just an intellectual pursuit, intellectual, I don't want to say gymnastics. Sometimes we find that kind of acrobatics, gymnastics that people are doing. So intellectually, we are trying to do something. It is not like that so far as Indian philosophy is concerned. It is not just mere inquiry. We know what is inquiry, vichara. Somebody may ask the question, you undertake a vichara, you do vichara, inquiry, you do philosophy. What do? You must have a purpose, a clear aim. You can't say that I am just pursuing knowledge for the sake of knowledge. This is a slogan which is very often heard. Knowledge for the sake of knowledge. What does it matter for you? If somebody says that he is pursuing knowledge for the sake of knowledge. Maybe it may lead to some kind of an invention, benefiting the entire mankind. That is something different. Just for the sake of knowledge, pursuit of knowledge, scientists have done. I have achieved great things which have been of great value to the mankind. We don't deny that one. But when we are doing philosophy, when we undertake an inquiry, what we call the vichara marga, then we must have some clear objective. The objective, as understood in the Indian tradition, is that we want to train ourselves so that we can have the benefit individually, we can also have the benefit collectively, socially. There is a twofold benefit. The individual can progress, evolve from stage to stage. And also the individual can contribute to the society of which he or she happens to be a member. The benefit is twofold. That means that philosophy has to be a total enterprise. Philosophy must be total. When I say total, it includes theory and also it includes practice. There is an important place for both of them. Only if you say that philosophy is total, total means, let me illustrate it. We have got religious practices. Generally, in the Western tradition, philosophy and religion are kept in isolation. So far as India is concerned, we don't keep the two in isolation. In fact, we would say that it is very difficult to find a line of demarcation, a clear line of demarcation between philosophy and religion. You can't say that philosophy ends here and religion begins, or religion ends here and then philosophy begins. No. And surprisingly, in India, in the university setup or in the college setup, we do not have a department of philosophy and separately a department of religion. We don't have. Whereas if you go to Western universities, you will find that the departments of philosophy will not have anything to do with religion. Religious studies will be a different department. Religious studies. And Indian philosophy and other subjects, they form part of a department of religious studies or maybe part of Asian studies program. In some universities, we have Asian studies program in which Indian philosophy may be taught, Chinese philosophy may be taught. That means that the department of philosophy in the Western universities, they do not confer the distinctive status of philosophy to Indian philosophy. Otherwise, when they teach Greek philosophy, when they teach continental philosophy, they would also teach Indian philosophy or Chinese philosophy. No, they don't. Far Eastern. Okay. Do you hear me? Okay. So, in the departments of philosophy in the American universities, the philosophical, okay, now, are you able to hear me? The departments of philosophy in American universities, they do not teach Indian philosophy because it is religion, it is theology, and so we have to go to Asian Studies program. But fortunately for us in India, shall I raise my voice? Huh? Okay. Uh, in one and the same department, we teach both religion and philosophy. Because let us look at the problem in another way. Philosophical systems are value oriented. Value oriented. We have certain values which we want to realize. It may be from the individual perspective, the development of the individual, or it may be from the social perspective, the development, the transformation of society. That means values are not restricted only to the individual. No. For example, we speak about social solidarity, social progress, communal harmony, communal. The word has been abused in India. It's a good word, communal, community. The moment I say somebody is communal, I'm just tarnishing him. The dictionary meaning doesn't say that. We have to care for the community, in the good sense of the term community, not in the narrow sense as we understand. So social harmony, social solidarity, social progress, the more we contribute to all these, the more one can individually evolve. Because the human being is a part of society. I don't know whether you have heard about Habermas. One of the important ideas that Habermas stresses is that we must adopt what is called discourse ethics. We have to talk to each other. Discourse ethics. Talk to each other. Share your views. Do not think that the other person doesn't have anything to contribute in dialogue. Accept the importance of dialogue. And also accept that when you are in dialogue with somebody, the other person is in a par with you. Just as you can contribute by way of discussion or dialogue, even so he or she can contribute. So, he has formulated the concept of discourse ethics, and social solidarity, communal solidarity, communal in the right sense of the word, communal solidarity. And the more we contribute as a member of the society, the more we can achieve ourselves in our spiritual progress. Apart from society, we cannot achieve anything. Many years ago, when I was in the high school, many years ago, I read a small poem by Alexander Selkirk. Probably you may know. There are 4 lines in that stanza. Society, friendship and love, divinely bestowed upon man. Oh, if I have the wings of a dove, how soon would I taste you again? How soon would I taste you again, enjoy you again? A person who has been living in society, has been taken out from society, and he is kept in a solitary island, all alone. He longs for society because there is nobody to talk to move with. He understands the importance of society, friendship. I cannot say that I am friend to myself. In one sense, I can say. But friendship involves basically friendship between 2 persons minimum. And love. I can love myself, but it becomes a psychological problem. You have heard of narcissism, you have heard about. So, this person who is left in the solitary place in the island says, society, friendship and love, you are divinely bestowed upon man, woman. If I had the wings of a dove, how I wish I have wings so that I can fly back. How soon would I taste you again? I enjoy friendship, society and love. It means the worst punishment that civil society can inflict upon a person is solitary confinement. A person in course of time will become mad. If a person is able to survive, a person like Mandela, it's something remarkable. Something remarkable. So, Habermas, one of the most creative thinkers, Habermas, he talks about social solidarity. He is a product of a movement known as critical social theory movement. Quite a few. Some of them went and settled in New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco. Now, he talks about discourse ethics. He talks about social solidarity, the significance of dialogue, in which every person has got a right to make a proposal that has to be considered by the other persons. All of them are of equal value. No proposal coming from somebody has got any special status. It has to be considered. Now, the reason why I mentioned that here is that generally we admit that philosophy is value-oriented. What kind of a value? All kinds of value. And if it is value-oriented, it is also action-oriented, because there is a link between value and action. A link between value and action. It is this linkage between value and action that has to be kept in mind when we reflect on this problem of the unity of theory and practice. Unity of theory and practice. Let me give an illustration. I am telling my students in the class that punctuality is very important. Sometimes I give a discourse on punctuality, you know. But if I believe that punctuality is a value, it's an important value that every person should care for, then I must get into the classroom on time. I'm not preaching punctuality only for others. If it is a good for my students, it is equally good for me. There is no point in giving something good to somebody else which is not a good to me. It can't be. And if I am not able to keep punctuality, there is no point in my talking about giving a discourse on punctuality to my students. Supposing I am very harsh when somebody comes late. I say, why do you come late? I don't think that if I am really reflective enough in what I say, I will abuse that boy or girl. Because I am not able to keep up punctuality. Unless there are important reasons which prevent me from being punctual. In a normal situation, I have to keep punctuality. That means, if punctuality is a value, if doing some service to somebody who is in need of it is a value, then I have to put it into practice. That's why we say that philosophy which is value-oriented is also action-oriented. Now, sometimes I try to convey this idea very effectively by using another, one of the oft-quoted statements of Wittgenstein. Wittgenstein, the great philosopher, whom even Russell, I told you, considered to be his teacher. After some time from England, he went back to Austria. He took up the job of a village school teacher. Remarkable. They have the courage to act like that. I do not know if I am given a chance to go back to my village and teach in a village school, whether I would readily go there. I will give all kinds of excuses about my age, health, this and that, want of facilities. Wittgenstein, who attained such a great reputation, he went back to, he's from Austria. He went back to Austria. He wanted to be a monk. He decided that he would be unfit for that job, for the professional work. Then he joined a monastery, something like a gardener. And then he was a village school teacher. Sometimes he was harsh, we were told. Even when he regretted subsequently for the harsh treatment of the students, some parents were not willing to ignore all that one. They said they were very hard, they did not like the way in which students were treated by him. And now when he was a teacher in the village school, he learned a lesson, important lesson. Earlier he has made a very significant contribution to philosophy of language. Now, this is now another turn in his philosophical thinking. Supposing somebody asks the meaning of a word. Now what do I do? A word has got more than one meaning. I must know the context in which that word has been used in a sentence. I will say that, all right, which is the sentence you tell me, let me see the sentence in which it occurs. Because we know that sometimes a word has got more than one meaning. So, on the basis of his experience of teaching young students in a village school, he developed a theory of language. It is known as ordinary language philosophy. Ordinary language philosophy. Ordinary language philosophy. I used to say that Shankara uses ordinary language. If you want to have a sample of ordinary language, you read the prose of Shankara. Read the Adhyasa Bhashya, you will enjoy. Not long sentences, as in the case of Ramanuja. I go immediately to Ramanuja for comparison. Great Acharya. He has got his own style. Shankara has got his own style. I would characterize the style of Shankara as ordinary language style. He directly wants to speak to the people. So he developed a theory of language which has come to be called ordinary language philosophy. Everyday language is very important. So he formulated a dictum as a result of his experience. Don't ask for the meaning of a word. Look at its usage. How the word is used in a sentence should be considered if you really want to understand the meaning of the sentence, of the word, or if you want to explain the meaning of the word to somebody else. There are such ambiguous words. Sovereign. It may be a coin. It may be the ruler. Page. P-A-G-E. A servant boy. The side of a page. Side of one paper. You can find any number of words in the language. So don't ask for the meaning of a word. What is the meaning of this word? It has many meanings. Look at its usage. I reformulate this sentence of Wittgenstein. Don't ask a person the values the person cares for. Don't ask the person. Very often, we don't speak frankly, we don't tell the truth. Consider the way in which some public leaders are interviewed, cine actors are interviewed. You ask for the value, what are the values you care for, madam? Or Mr. What are the values? He gives a long list. I care for my parents, this and that, and a long list. All of them, or most of them are untrue. So don't ask for the values of a person. Look at his action, look at her action. Because action is the index of the values a person cares for. If you believe in helping others, you help them when the need arises, when the occasion arises. When the occasion arises, when you are in a position to help somebody else, you don't do that. I used to give you a different example, a homely example. In many homes, we don't teach our children. We have to engage a tuition teacher. On the contrary, what we do is, we say that we go to a slum area and teach the children in the slum. Your own children, they are treated like slum boys and slum girls. You don't care for them. You don't teach them. But you are busy otherwise. For the sake of publicity, you go there. I am doing social service. You require somebody to do the social service for you at your home. You go there. I am cooking for food. Collective cooking in a community. and you engage a cook at home. Why don't you cook at home? Then spare time you go and do that cooking. Charity begins at home. So don't ask the values of a person, but look at his action. The action is the index, is the mirror of the values a person cares for. That's why I talked earlier about commitment. If I promise to return a book by such and such a time, I have to. If I don't, then what about the promise I made? Just for the sake of saying something? If I know the meaning of the word promise, what it means, the moment I make a promise, I carry an obligation to fulfill the promise. It is self-imposed obligation. Yeah, you said you will return it. Actually, the other person has got a right to get back the book. Self-imposed obligation, not imposed by society or anything. You say that I promise to do that one. I will help you. I will help you. Means I mean that. One great quality which I admired in the American academic staff is when they say yes, they mean that. When they say no, they mean that. If you go and request them, ask them second time, will you please? I say, I told you I can't do, I should not do. I'm sorry. When he promises to do, he means that, he does it. You don't have to remind. It's not needed. He means that. All that has got a lot of things to do with the idea which I am talking about, the unity of theory and practice. So in the tradition, in the Indian tradition, whatever be the system, it is a philosophy which is value-oriented, in the sense that I have been telling you, the values are both individual and social. You can't bifurcate the two. These are the individual values, these are the social values. No. What appears to be the individual values are really social values. Take, for example, you know that Manu made a classification of values into two, Sadharana Dharmas and Vishesha Dharmas. Sadharana Dharmas, ordinary duties, well, one has to keep oneself clean. Cleanliness you take, for example. Cleanliness is obviously something personal. I have to care for the hygienic principles. But if you carefully examine the values in the context of society, it has got a social bearing. What is the point in your becoming sick, when you are not caring for your health? You become a liability to the family, you become a problem to society in the long run. It may appear to be a personal, individual value, hygiene, but it has got a larger impact upon society. That's why Nietzsche went to another extreme. He says that old people, they are a liability in society. Sick people are a liability. No. If we do not have the poor and the needy, how can somebody be a philanthropist? Can anybody be a philanthropist? there are people who are sick and poor, but if somebody deliberately doesn't care for the health in the family, spoils his health or her health, this is a problem to the family, it's a problem to the community at large. There is the close link from one to another. So, the Indian philosophical systems insisted on the unity of theory and practice. We can't bifurcate. We can't say it is only theory. That's why I said that when I refer to Russell's statement, it doesn't matter whether I prove the existence of God or I do not prove the existence of God. I don't think that it may be all right for Russell because he's a kind of a free thinker, free agent. We don't have that kind of a courage. It is not desirable to have that kind of a courage. So this is the ethos of these Indian systems. All the systems, starting from the Charvaka. When the Charvaka says, eat, drink and be merry, that is the value. Secondly, all these systems suggest that we have to overcome the problem of suffering in empirical existence. Now, this attitude of the Indian philosophical systems, Shad-darshanas and also the non-Vedic systems, this attitude has been interpreted as a kind of a pessimistic outlook. No. Indian philosophy is pessimistic. That is one criticism. Because we say that there is a problem of suffering and we have to overcome suffering and attain liberation. The word liberation is such a comprehensive term. It refers to all kinds of liberation. Economic liberation, exploitation liberation, political liberation, and also liberation in the sense in which we talk about in philosophy and religion, liberation from the bondage of empirical existence. Well, that is the problem. We can't just deny the existence of such a problem. That is the problem of suffering, empirical existence. We want to overcome that problem, suffering in all ways. That's why we talk about suffering in different ways. We also talk about liberation in several ways. And what we refer to as suffering, sometimes, I don't know whether Dr. Jayakumar made a reference to this problem. When you are taken out of the family, when you are taken out of the society, then you are alienated from society. Well, he was referring to cutting the trees and all that one. You separate them from the Mother Earth. Please recall the entire lecture he gave. For our own selfish interests, we uproot the trees, we get them separated from the Mother Earth. So it's a kind of a separation which is a problem. The labor class is alienated from their own labor, says Marx. It's a problem. Problem of alienation. Sartre speaks about the problem of alienation. Alienation from society. Different kinds of alienation. Well, the life I lead is such that I am alienated from my own self. I don't have the time to look into myself. It's a problem of alienation. The only thing is sometimes we don't look at the problem that way. So when the Indian systems talk about the cycle of birth and rebirth and we must come out of it, immediately the criticism is that, oh, this is a system of philosophy in which pessimism seems to be the most important thing. Now look at Shankara. He straightaway addresses the problem of adhyasa. If there is any problem which is an everyday problem for us, which we do not really understand, is the problem of adhyasa, what we call superimposition. Everyday life you find this problem of adhyasa. That's why the first thing that he did before writing his commentary on the Brahma Sutra is to talk about adhyasa. We don't pay attention to that. We think that it's better for us not to pay attention to that one. No. We carry the burden. Now, all the systems talk about, as a common principle, that we have to achieve this freedom from bondage, from empirical existence. Even the Charvaka says there is a problem. Your life, your goal is only attainment of happiness. Attain happiness. Don't postpone it. Because there is no tomorrow. There is no tomorrow. That is his philosophy. Be happy even today. How long we have been suffering? In this life? Yes, in this life, the earlier life. We don't know. We don't know which was our first life. We don't know. That's why we say that one, the life of every jiva is anadi. Anadi. Are you able to hear me? The life of every jiva is anadi. And we don't speak about first creation. We don't. There is a reason for that. We don't know. How long have there been this creation, process of creation? We do not know. But we know that it can be terminated. Buddhism says that this can be terminated. Jainism believes that this problem can be terminated. All the systems believe in that one. So, there is a need for us to attain freedom, liberation, not in the narrow, restricted sense of economic freedom or social freedom or political, all that are needed. Something more. We require spiritual freedom. We require spiritual freedom. And it is this kind of spiritual freedom that is suggested in the Vedic texts. This is suggested, formulated by the different systems of philosophy. Where do you have it in the Vedic text, Upanishadic text? Just reflect on the Panchakosa Vichara. It's a familiar doctrine to all of us, Panchakosa. But if we try to reflect on the Panchakosa theory, we will realize that the theory is so formulated that it tries to help an individual to move from one level to another level. There are 5 levels. There is a physical level, bodily physical level, Annamaya Kosa. There is a vital level, Pranamaya Kosa. There is a mental level, Manomaya Kosa. Then there is the intellectual level, Vijnanamaya Kosa. Then finally we have Anandamaya Kosa, the level of blissful existence. Anandamaya Kosa. Now, imagine a kind of a triangle with a base and the top is a triangle. Annamaya Kosha takes care of, supposing you convert it into value system. At the level of the body, at the bodily level, the physical level, there are certain needs that have to be fulfilled for our survival. Bodily values of various kinds: food, water, shelter, companionship. Companionship. Well, we talk about the basic values, fundamental values. Then we have to take care of our health and all that one. We have got the pranamaya kosha, the level of vitality. And then as you move to the mental level, manomaya kosha, then we recognize the importance of various social values. We are not confined only to the bodily values. We are also concerned with the social values. Man is a gregarious being. The human being is gregarious. As much gregarious as animals are. We go together. Sometimes a person like Nietzsche may say it's a crowd mentality, group mentality. But we need that. We want friendship. We want association. That's why I quoted Alexander Selkirk. Society, friendship and love. We care for that. Social values are there. Institutional values are there. Then we go up still. Intellectual values. We are interested in the pursuit of truth, beauty, normative values, goodness. But still they are not enough. We think in terms of spiritual value, highest spiritual value, liberation. What is a value at one level is not necessarily a value at another level for us. That shows that we are growing, we are progressing. Take the case of the morning newspaper. We care for the newspaper. The morning, I am accustomed to read the Hindu. I would like to have the Hindu. If I am accustomed to read a Deccan Chronicle, Deccan Chronicle. It is the most important thing for all of us. Supposing you are gone, you have read the newspaper, morning newspaper. What do you do with the paper in the evening or the next day? Unless you are a correspondent, you want to have some of these papers in the archives, personal archives and all that one. It becomes just a sheer waste of paper. I use them as my tablecloth. The next day, all the papers, I put them on the table. After food, I don't have a piece of cloth on the table. Nor do I preserve them to be given up for the weight, 5 rupees, 6 rupees. I can as well use it here. It's of no use to me. What is value at one time in the day is not a value at another time in the day. The things we valued, a child values, they are not valuable to it as it grows. Keep them as a memento. Sometimes I do that for the sake of children. Whether children pay attention to them or not, that is something different. So, the Panchakosha theory is so formulated that we can think in terms of what may be called spiritual transcendence. I use the word spiritual transcendence. Transcendence from one level to another level. From one stage to another stage. From the bodily to the vital to the mental, from the mental to the intellectual. And then you say that I'm having at least partially what is known as happiness, bliss. but still it is not total. It gives you a taste of what happiness really is. You say, I am really happy. That happiness is qualitatively different from the kind of happiness that you derive when I eat my food, when I drink my coffee. It's momentarily valuable. I don't deny that. That's why at the bodily level, yes. So, think of this value system, because we are considering the problem of the transition from overcoming our bondage and achieving liberation. Liberation is such a total word, total concept. What kind of a liberation? Don't we care for political liberation, economic? All of them we do care from the social perspective. But still, I am a person, I have my individual goal, which is really connected with the goal of the society. And therefore, I try to progress myself. I'm a spiritual aspirant, to say. All of us are seekers of truth, seekers of the liberation. And as we move from the base towards the top. Here, we have got intellectual values, all the other values, truth, beauty, and goodness. Then social values here, bodily values, social values, and intellectual values like truth, beauty, and goodness. And then you still move further. This is the inner meaning of the Panchakosha doctrine which has been formulated in the Upanishads. Taittiriya, for example. Is it something dogmatic? Something not related to society? Why is it that we don't pay attention to that? After all, there are two approaches. This is a beautiful Vedic approach, Vedantic approach. Two approaches. The approach at the micro level, the approach from the macro level. Two parallel lines. They converge at a particular point of place. Two parallel lines. What is true at the individual, micro level, is true of the world at the macro level. The Upanishads say that every human being is made up of the five elements. The same way, five elements go to the constitution of the world. And when we study the individual, the jiva, the reality of the jiva is a self, which is covered by the five koshas, or which is covered by the three shariras. It does not matter whether you think in terms of Sariratraya theory or Panchakosha theory. The reality of the jiva is the self. That is the world, Jagat. The reality of the world is Ishvara, the Creator God. It is the Creator God who has manifested the world with the help of Maya. The world comprising the five elements. So there is Ishvara at the back of the world. There is the self or Atman at the back of the jiva. Now finally we give the grand equation. The self is identical with Ishvara, because the self is of the nature of consciousness, Ishvara is of the nature of consciousness, consciousness is just one. It is this consciousness which is at the back of the entire reality, whether you look at it from the micro point of view or from the macro point of view. It is from this perspective we are called upon to give the interpretation of the Mahavakya Tattvamasi. Vachyartha is of no use. we go in for Lakshyartha. Now the point I am trying to convey here is that the study of the classical texts which speak about the liberation, well, you can go to Buddhism, you can go to Jainism. Take the case of Jainism. It talks about Samyak Darshana, Samyak Jnana, Samyak Charitra. It tries to use two different words, Darshana and Jnana. Probably we will say Darshana is Jnana, Jnana is Darshana. Samyak Darshana, the right faith. They interpret Samyak Darshana as the right faith. Faith in the Acharyas of the tradition, Tirthankaras. In their teachings, there is a need for Shraddha. We also say that there is a need for Shraddha. Shraddha in our scripture, Shraddha in our Guru. They say the same thing. Samyak Darshana must lead to Samyak Jnana. Then you get a clear picture of the whole thing. As a result of faith, acceptance of scripture, acceptance of the guidance of the teacher and all that one. And then it helps you to reform yourself so that you can attain the goal. Samyak Charitra. So there is a transition shown by the system from Darshana to Jnana to Charitra. Conduct. Same is the case with regard to Buddhism. The Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Paths. And the fourth sutra of Gautama, the fourth sutra about which I talked earlier, Dayakrishna says that the fourth sutra should not be there. It should come last. Shankara appreciates the fourth sutra. The fourth sutra composed by Gautama. Acharyena pranita nyaya upabhrumidam sutram Acharyena pranitam. He pays the greatest tribute to Gautama. Acharyena pranitam. We criticize Nyaya for other reasons. In one place he says the Nyaya system, a Tarkika, is a bull without horns. It's a bull without horns. Shankara is an accepted parliamentary language. Don't think that Shankara philosophically abuses. No, it's an accepted usage. When we say asat, when Purvaksha, we say it's asat. It's unsound, untenable. Nobody can take me to the court of law. This is what Shankara says. That is criticism. Where praise is needed, he is the first to shower praise in the maximum. What kind of a sutra written by this Acharya? Full of, pregnant with meaning. Acharyena Nyaya Upabhrumidam Sutram. The sutra is full of this logic, full of significance. Acharyena Pranitam. How? Look at the causal chain. As formulated in the system, there is the problem of suffering, dukkha. The chain starts from what is available to us. What is available to us is this dukkha. There is such a thing called suffering. It's in several ways, at several stages. It doesn't mean that I am very pessimistic or you are pessimistic. No. It's an acceptance of the fact. So there is such a thing called, it requires more power to wipe out. Even then it doesn't go. You start with dukkha. This is a permanent marker? I think so. You're testing me.
No, sir. He was not available, that's why.
Okay, all right. There is such a thing called, it's called suffering, dukkha. And what is the suffering? What is the cause of suffering? Janma, birth. Dukkha, janma, dukkha, janma. If there is no birth, there is not going to be suffering at all. And what is the cause of birth? Pravritti, action. Various deeds that we do. Can you give a catalogue of the deeds? I sometimes look back. I talk to my brother also. Sometimes we do a collective kind of rehearsal. My brother is here. Sometimes I mistake him for me. We do. It's necessary for us to do some kind of a rehearsal, how we lived in the village, this and that. We must look back. Everyone, every day before you go to bed, have time for yourself. I tell all the people, I tell my children, I tell my daughters-in-law, find time for yourself. Don't say I am too busy with the work. You don't have the time to talk to children, you don't have the time to talk to your husband or wife, as the case may be. Have at least 10 minutes time for yourself. Reflect. How did you spend your time in the day, one day? Action. Dukkha, janma. Action, the word that is used is pravritti. Acharya, Gautama Acharya uses the term pravritti. Action. Why is it that we are involved in various kinds of actions? Why? Dosha, defect. Dosha. What are the defects? Raga, dvesha. They are the defects. Raga and dvesha. Our desire and aversion. It was the main issue that Buddha addressed to. It is the main issue that all the Jaina thinkers addressed to. That is what in Nyaya system speaks about here. What Vedanta system says. Dosha. And why is it that there is this raga and dvesha? What is the cause of that? It doesn't come on its own. It arises because of mithya jnana, wrong knowledge. Mithya jnana. So, dukkha, janma, pravritti, dosha, mithya jnana. So, mithya jnana is the source. It leads to dosha, it leads to action, further it leads to janma, finally dukkha. What is it you have to do? The causal chain I have indicated from what we are now to the source. Now, the Acharya says that dukkha, janma, pravritti, dosha, mityajnananam uttarottara apaye tadanantara apayat apavargaha. Remove one thing that is implied here. Wrong knowledge because you do not know the Samyak Jnana. If you have that Samyak Jnana, I refer to the case of Jainism, same thing in the case of Buddhism. If there is the right knowledge, then erroneous cognition will go away. Error arises because we do not know the truth as the truth. If you know the truth as a truth, then it is the right cognition, Samyak Jnana. With the Samyak Jnana arises, wrong knowledge will go. If it goes, dosha will go. Then pravritti automatically again will go. Then birth will go. Then suffering will go. Uttarottara apaye tadanantara apayat apavargaha. This is the sutra. Fourth sutra. This is the sutra given the Nyaya Sutra by Gautama. That means that there may be difference of opinion with regard to the way in which you construct a philosophy. That is not the problem. But the ultimate goal is liberation, overcoming suffering, and then the causal chain traces to the source from which the suffering arises. The ultimate source is Mithya Jnana. Why is it that there is Mithya Jnana? We have not obtained the right knowledge. If we can obtain the right knowledge, the problems are solved. Now, the Upanishadic tradition says that after all, there is the individual, there is a world. There is a micro world, there is a macro world. And the ultimate support of the jiva, the micro world, is the Atman or the self, which is the nature of consciousness. That which supports the world, the macro world, is Ishvara. Ishvara, its essential nature, is only consciousness. So the supreme reality is consciousness, Chaitanya or Chit. This is the message. So you can attain this message through a study of the Panchakosha theory, or the study of the Avasthantraya theory, or through Karyakarana Vichara. In all the cases, you've got the Vichara. And this is a common theme that we find in all the systems. And it is I have also covered knowledge versus ignorance, law of karma. All the, excepting Charvaka, all the systems accept that there is a thing called the law of karma, theory of karma. What do I suffer? Whom do I hold responsible? Do I hold my parents responsible? Of course, there is a genetic factor. You are only shifting the blame. I am going to bear my weight. I have to face the situation. So, I have to reap the consequences of my action. Maybe not in this life, in the earlier life. Sometimes I also reap good consequences. So, the one way by means of which the Indian system has looked at the problem is through the law of karma. And it is not fatalism. Again, there is a criticism. Well, the Indian systems take shelter under fatalism. No. No. I do not propose to go into a lengthy discussion about this problem. It is not fatalism. Everybody has to make a choice. Everybody has to make a choice. And everybody has to bear the responsibility for the choice he or she makes. I often quote Sartre's statement, no one is an innocent victim. No one is an innocent victim. We see usually this is the time students and parents go to the teacher, somebody, what is the course my son can take, my daughter can take. Who can decide for you? Supposing something goes wrong, will you tell that, oh, I went and asked him, he asked me to join, to go to this school or that school? Why don't you choose? Read the paper and you'll get all kinds of guidance. I didn't want to take up that job, and then my father forced me to take up that job. At a time, you could have given up. If you have the courage, you can give up. We don't have the courage. We don't accept responsibility. So he says, no one is an innocent victim. There are ways and ways by means of which we would have overcome the problem, any problem. We don't have the courage to act. Therefore, we take shelter. We make somebody a scapegoat. We say that he advised me, I'm sorry. And therefore, when we talk about the law of karma, it is not to suggest that you must to keep quiet and then say that, oh, things will take place according to my karma. No, it will not. You are only tightening the chain and not breaking the chain. I do not, as I told you, that it's not necessary to go into the details. So this is the common ethos of the Indian systems. And a better way to understand our systems, whatever be the systems, Nyaya, up to the Vedanta, believe that the systems have got only one eye, to help the individual overcome the problem, individual and social. And the Upanishads, the texts have clearly helped us. The Acharyas have helped us. There are different approaches to the problem. So this is up to a particular stage. I'll call for questions to tell me how you find yourself, what exactly is the problem you are having, before I proceed further. And also I have mentioned the Varna and Asrama theory. You can also take it with that. And there are two important aspects that we have to remember when we talk about the Varnasrama theory. We are not talking about social stratification in the sense in which generally it is understood. Social stratification. Take the Varna theory or take both Varna and Asrama theory. There is no society which is really free from social stratification, class structure. Some form or other, in some form or other, in every society there is this social stratification. I don't know, have you heard of the name of Marcuse? He wrote a book, One Dimensional Man. He belonged to the critical theory group, Frankfurt School. I mentioned Habermas. Marcuse, M-A-R-C-U-S-E, Marcuse. One of those people, continental thinkers, who left the continent and then took asylum in USA. Some people in New York, some people in San Francisco, Los Angeles. They started the new school of social work, social philosophy. Marcuse went to California side. He wrote a book, One Dimensional Man. Very title is attractive. One Dimensional Man. Now, like குதிரைகள் எல்லாம் ஜான் போட்டு அப்படியே போகும். இப்படின்னு திரும்ப முடியாது, இப்படின்னு திரும்ப முடியாது. One traffic, so that it can be controlled. The human being is one dimensional. We don't look at the sides. Now the main theory that Marcuse develops in that book is to tell us that all of us have been treated like horses which go in one direction. We go only in one direction. And considering the American society, Marcuse says that, after all, we say that it is a republic, uh, and all that goes with the republic, and it is decided by a kind of a parliamentary system. There is the executive head, president, all that. But who actually decides the whole thing? Technocrats. People who have got control over technology, technocrats. And what is decided by the technocrats is executed by the bureaucrats. Technical advice is given, and that is implemented by the bureaucrats. So there is a class of technocrats, if not any other class. There is a class of technocrats, class of bureaucrats, and so on. Who controls everything? No doubt the president. The president is advised. Look at any society, starting from the Republic of Plato. He talked about three classes: the philosopher king class, the warrior class, and an artisan class. Administrative power, everything rests with the philosopher king class. Defense, security, the warrior class. The artisan class, well, they are the nerve, the bread and butter of the entire society. Division of labor. And once there is the principle of division of labor, there is a specialization of functions. If I go on doing a particular kind of work, I become a specialist in that. So there are two principles according to Plato. Division of labor. In the entire society, there is a division of labor. All of us cannot do the same thing. We have to do different things. Once there is this division of labor, then there is a specialization of functions. Somebody becomes an expert carpenter, somebody a good teacher, somebody an administrator, somebody a lawyer, somebody a doctor, somebody an artisan, somebody an agriculturist. Specialization of functions. Now, also in this context, I refer to a theory known as the theory of my station and its duties. This theory is was formulated by an Oxford philosopher named Bradley. Oxford philosopher. Bradley, F.H. Bradley. His cousin, A.C. Bradley, Shakespearean critic. A.C. Bradley. This is F.H. Bradley. He retired as a tutor, as a fellow in Balliol College, Oxford. Tutor. We have used the word tutor in a contemptuous way. Tutor in the department, the lowest academic position. Was tutor, Balliol College, Oxford. Fellow, Balliol College, Oxford. And therefore, don't immediately compare what we mean by a tutor in a college. In Department of Languages, particularly English, they have this blessed status, tutor. Now, Bradley wrote a book on ethics. He is very close to Advaita. His metaphysics he wrote a book called Appearance and Reality. Advaita metaphysics, like that. And one of the chapters in his book on ethics, my station and its duties. So the concept of my station and its duties. This is Bradleyan term, my station and its duties. Every person, when he lives in society, when he grows up, occupies a particular station in life. Station, we call it ashrama, or we call it varna. My station is that of a teacher. That is my station. That is my position, which I chose. This is my station in life. Somebody is an administrator. Somebody is a doctor, a lawyer. Somebody chooses to be an agriculturist, a politician. That is, every person, man or woman, occupies a certain station in life. And according to the station a person occupies, there are duties. So the duties, the cluster of duties, it goes with the station a person occupies in life. Teacher means duties of a teacher, duties of a doctor, duties of a lawyer, administrator. So he developed the theory known as my station and its duties. It's a great theory, acceptable theory. It is the same thing that is formulated by this Varnasrama principle. Varna is not caste. Varna means the class, which is determined by your own abilities, your choice and all that one. Guna karma vibhaga. That is what the Gita text speaks of. Guna karma vibhaga. Vibhaga, the distinction that is based upon the guna. That is what Plato did when he formulated the Republic. Guna karma vibhaga. Your actions are determined by the gunas or the qualities that you have developed. And then there are 4 stages, we say. There are a brahmachari, there are a grahastha, there are a vanaprastha, there are a sannyasi. Now, if you want to put it in this way, every person occupies some station in life. Maybe at a bachelor at a time, maybe a household at a time. Maybe a teacher. So you have got all the varnas. That's what Bradley talks about my station and its duties. It is exactly what is suggested by the theory. Of course, it has been abused. There is no doubt about that. We have contributed to the social evil. I don't propose to go into the details because that is another issue. Now, I made a reference to point 6 there, Varna and Asrama theory, compared with Bradley's theory of my station and its duties. Or if you want, Plato's 3 classes. And the 2 principles I said, that is the division of labor, and second principle, specialization of functions. That is true. I'm a good cook, I've been telling you. I started cooking, trial and error process. I improve, I improvise. I look at the book, Meenakshi, Samuel Pustam. Sometimes I used to ask my sister, if I am in Pondicherry, I will make a call to my sister. Oh, I am now in a soup, you please tell me, how do I proceed further? She said, do this, Balu. I'm quite happy, I'm comfortable. Now, if you start doing, if you start the profession of a lecturer, at the beginning difficulties, you don't know how to come out, and you will be tested by the students. I told you, we can manage, but we can't manage all the time. I told you, I make a confession that I do not know anything about samadhi and all that one, last time or year before last. If Swamijis were there, if you can come and tell, I will sit there. And keeping the shrine here, I cannot say that I can manage. No. Whom do I deceive? Myself. I made a confession, people were surprised. So why do you say, you can't talk about samadhi? I can, theory I can say. I never practiced. You tested me yesterday. Do you Sandhya Vandanam? I said no. I don't do. But I do my puja, yes. Pitru karma, I do. Then what do you do? The food throughout the day, do you follow? No, I can't follow. I have not become a social problem, but I do respect. If I harm somebody, it is an evil. If I fail to do my duty, professional duty, yes, I make a commitment, I am here. I try to compensate in some other way. If you believe in the principle of compensation, if you say there is no compensation principle, then it is a different issue. I do believe. What you lack in one thing, you can try to compensate in some other way. That is life. So, our aim is, I have just indicated, social training for spiritual development, cultivation of detachment. This is what Hiriyanna repeatedly says. Repeatedly says. Two things are there in our Indian systems. A moral training, you can have a kind of a detachment and move towards the goal, spiritual development. Spiritual, what I call spiritual transcendence. And I am better today than what I was yesterday. I know, I am moving. Maybe that I am not able to reach the goal, doesn't matter. What is left over will be carried out, carried over to the next life. So, this is one important, I have given the grouping of the Vedic systems, commentarial tradition I have spoken. Then I have to get into the Nyaya system. I have prepared the ground now so far. And 5 o'clock, till 5 or 5:30? 5. So tomorrow morning, you must have your questions ready, or if you want, by after dinner, if I am sitting, I will be sitting there, and Anthony and Subramanian and others may join. Just come, if you have got anything, I can share informally, just as I learned many things from him. Many things from him. Any urgent question that you cannot postpone tomorrow? And we'll be able to explain the Panchakosha theory in the way in which I said, do that. You can score your point. You can score your point. People will respect the tradition that we belong to. It's no ordinary tradition. One tradition, Shankara pays the tribute to Acharya Gautama. Can you imagine that in any other philosophical? No. We are so open. And wherever there is a truth, we go and accept the truth. We surrender ourselves to the truth.